I knew it all along, you son of a and I'm finna beat your ass. Don't play with me. I seen that with my own eyes. And I'm finna dust your ass, bitch. And I mean that. And I mean that. You been lying, ho. You a liar.
That threatening voicemail, that was just the beginning of the end for 29-year-old Cornisha Butler. By that evening, she was laying on her living room floor, shot multiple times in the face by the woman who claimed to love her. Her youngest baby standing just feet away, witnessing Mama take her last breath.
Look closely. For the first time, we're seeing video of a woman retrieving a gun moments before she murdered her wife.
Now, let me tell you something. Cornisha had done everything right. Police reports, restraining orders, calling for help over and over again. But the system moved slower than molasses. And when you're dealing with somebody who's already told you they're ready to catch a life sentence just to hurt you, slow ain't fast enough. This is the story of Cornisha Butler, a mother, a hustler, a woman who built her dream from nothing, only to have it destroyed by someone who couldn't let go. Cornisha Butler wasn't always in Atlanta, y'all. She came up in Memphis, Tennessee, and baby girl was something special from day one. Friends described her as magnetic. You know that type of person who walks in a room and just lights the whole place up with their energy? That was Cornisha. Family called her the glue, the one who could crack a joke and ease all the tension at the dinner table. But behind all that charm was pure grit. See, life didn't hand Cornisha nothing on a silver platter. She became a mama young, and while some folks might have seen that as a setback, Cornisha saw it as motivation. Those 4 babies, 3 daughters and 1 son, they became her why. Every late night, every early morning, every sacrifice she made was for them. Girl was smart with her money too. By day, she was working as a registered tax preparer, helping folks get their finances right while securing her own bag. By night, she was a licensed esthetician, making people feel beautiful while building up her clientele. 2 hustles, 1 goal, financial freedom for her and her kids. But Cornisha had bigger dreams than just getting by. She wanted to build something lasting, something her children could inherit. That vision led her to pack up and move to Atlanta. Moving wasn't easy, girl, but Cornisha was determined. She saved up, worked extra, and eventually bought her dream home, a spacious 5-bedroom house where her babies could grow up safe and loved. That house became everything to her. Family gatherings, birthday parties, holiday celebrations. She was always posting on social media, showing the world how far she'd come. For Cornisha, that home wasn't just about square footage. It was proof that a young mama from Memphis could build something beautiful. But y'all know how the story goes. Sometimes when you're building your dream, somebody else is plotting to tear it down. In 2016, Cornisha met a woman named Shakia Perkins. At first, it looked like one of those fairy tale love stories, you know? Shakia was attentive, charming, and seemed to give Cornisha all the support she deserved. Within months, they were living together, playing house, looking all cute on social media. But here's the thing about toxic people. They don't start off showing you their true colors. Shakia knew exactly how to play the role at first. She helped with the kids, supported Cornisha's hustle, and made herself seem indispensable. From the outside looking in, they looked like the perfect couple. But slowly, those red flags started waving. What started as little comments about who Cornisha was texting turned into full investigations of her phone. What began as, "I just want to spend time with you," became, "Why you need to go out with your friends anyway?" The jealousy crept in like a slow leak, and before Cornisha knew it, she was drowning in it. Arguments started getting heated. Shakia would question every move Cornisha made, accuse her of cheating, and throw fits when she didn't get her way. The woman who used to build Cornisha up was now tearing her down daily. And when words weren't enough to control her, Shakia started getting physical. Friends started noticing changes in Cornisha. She wasn't coming around as much. When she did, she seemed on edge, like she was walking on eggshells. The vibrant woman who used to light up every room was dimming, and everyone could see it except maybe Cornisha herself. But here's what's real about abusive relationships. By the time you realize you're in one, they've already got you convinced that the chaos is normal. They've isolated you from your support system, made you dependent on them financially or emotionally, and convinced you that you're the problem. Cornisha tried to make it work. She tried to love Shakia through her jealousy, tried to prove she was faithful, tried to be the perfect partner. But toxic people don't want perfect partners, they want control. And when they start losing that control, that's when things get really dangerous. By late 2021, what started as jealousy and controlling behavior had exploded into full-blown violence. We're not talking about little arguments anymore, y'all. We're talking about attempted murder. Picture this, you're driving down the street, minding your business, when your ex deliberately rams into your car, trying to run you off the road. That's exactly what happened to Cornisha in September 20. Shakia literally used her vehicle as a weapon, hitting Cornisha's car multiple times, trying to cause a serious accident. But it didn't stop there. Days later, Shakia forced her way into Cornisha's home, damaging the door frame in a jealous rage. She was breaking and entering, destroying property, and terrorizing Cornisha in her own space, the space that was supposed to be her sanctuary. Then came the fires. Later that same month, investigators got called to Cornisha's house because somebody had set her cars on fire. 2 vehicles, including her beautiful pink Mercedes-Benz, completely destroyed. Flames were licking at the house itself, and if they hadn't caught it when they did, Cornisha and her babies could have been burned alive. The fire department labeled it arson immediately, and everybody knew who did it. There was only one person angry enough, obsessed enough, and reckless enough to try something that dangerous. But the most chilling part? The text messages that started coming after each incident. Shakia wasn't even trying to hide her intentions anymore. She sent Cornisha messages spelling out exactly what she planned to do. In one text, she told Cornisha straight up that she would soon be dead and that she didn't care if it landed her in prison. In another message, she made it clear she was aiming for first-degree murder, not second. Let me repeat that. She was literally telling Cornisha that she was planning premeditated murder and didn't care about the consequences. These weren't empty threats from somebody having a bad day. These were detailed promises from someone who had already shown she was willing to destroy property, risk lives, and escalate to violence. Shakia was laying out a roadmap to murder, and she was sending it directly to her intended victim. Now, you would think this is when the system would step in and protect Cornisha, right? Wrong. Police did intervene multiple times, arrests were made, but every single time Shakia got bond and walked right back out onto the streets. Despite restraining orders, despite the clear pattern of escalation, despite the explicit threats, the courts kept letting this woman go free. They treated each incident like it was separate instead of seeing the bigger picture that this was a woman building up to commit murder. Cornisha called for help 13 times. 13 times she reached out to a system that was supposed to protect her. And 13 times that system failed her. While she was following every legal avenue available, documenting every incident and begging for protection, her abuser was walking free, planning the next attack. The writing was on the wall, but apparently nobody in positions of power could read. Y'all, despite everything Shakia had put her through, the car ramming, the break-ins, the arson, the death threats, Cornisha was still trying to live her life. She was decorating her house for the holidays, planning to host Thanksgiving dinner for her babies for the very first time in their new home. She wanted to show them that no matter what chaos was happening around them, Mama was still gonna make sure they had joy. But Shakia, she wasn't about to let Cornisha have peace. Not now, not ever. The evening of November 16, 2022 started like any other evening. Cornisha was home with her youngest baby, probably thinking about dinner, maybe helping with homework, just living her life as a mama. But then Shakia showed up, and what should have been a quiet Tuesday night turned into pure hell. Now, we don't know exactly what triggered the argument that night, but here's what we do know. Cornisha had finally reached her breaking point. She was done with the toxic cycle, done with the threats, done with living in fear. She told Shakia the truth she'd been holding back. This relationship was over, for real this time. But Shakia couldn't handle hearing that. She couldn't accept that Cornisha was choosing peace over chaos, choosing her children's safety over this toxic love. So when Cornisha stood firm in her decision, something in Shakia just snapped. Here's where it gets real, y'all. Instead of walking away like a grown person would do, instead of accepting that sometimes relationships end, Shakia made a choice. She walked out to her car, not to leave, but to get her gun. Think about that for a second. She had to walk outside, open her car door, grab a weapon, and walk back into that house. That wasn't a moment of passion. That wasn't losing control. And it didn't matter to her that Cornisha's youngest child was right there in the house. Didn't matter that this baby was about to witness something no child should ever see. All that mattered to Shakia was that if she couldn't have Cornisha, nobody could. When she came back into that house with that 9mm, Cornisha knew what time it was. This wasn't another argument. This wasn't another threat. This was the moment Shakia had been promising in those text messages, the moment she made good on her word. Gunshots rang out in that quiet neighborhood just after 6 p.m. Multiple shots fired at close range. Cornisha, the woman who had worked 2 jobs to provide for her family, who had saved up to buy her dream home, who had tried everything legal to protect herself, she was lying on her living room floor, bleeding out while her holiday decorations still twinkled in the background. Her youngest baby was standing right there, witnessing Mama's final moments. That child is going to carry that image for the rest of their life because one woman couldn't accept the word no. When that first 911 call came in, dispatchers knew they were dealing with something serious. Reports of multiple gunshots inside a family home just days before Thanksgiving. Patrol cars raced through South Fulton with their sirens blazing, but for Cornisha, help was already too late. Officers arrived to find the front door partially open and a neighbor standing outside pointing toward the house with terror in their eyes. Inside, the scene was devastating. There was 29-year-old Cornisha Butler, struck multiple times by gunfire, lying in the same living room where she used to host family dinners and birthday parties. First responders tried everything they could, but the injuries were too severe. Cornisha was pronounced dead at the scene, her dreams cut short by someone who claimed to love her. But the most heartbreaking part, her youngest child had to be pulled from that house, physically unharmed but emotionally destroyed. That baby saw their mama get murdered, and no amount of therapy is ever going to erase that trauma. Detectives immediately knew this wasn't random. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong or a stranger breaking in. This was personal, intimate, and calculated. The way the shooting happened, the location of the wounds, the fact that nothing was stolen, everything pointed to someone who knew Cornisha personally. As investigators started canvassing the neighborhood, the pieces fell into place quick. Multiple residents had seen a vehicle circling the area earlier that evening, moving slow like someone was watching and waiting. Others heard the argument inside the house before the gunshots rang out. Meanwhile, forensic teams were collecting evidence. Shell casings from a 9mm handgun were scattered across that living room floor. Security cameras from neighboring houses were pulled for review because in 2022, everybody got cameras and somebody was bound to catch something. It didn't take long for detectives to focus on their prime suspect. When they interviewed Cornisha's family, everybody said the same name, Shakia Perkins. And when investigators dug deeper, they discovered something that should have prevented this tragedy. Shakia wasn't supposed to be anywhere near Cornisha. This woman was out on bond for multiple charges related to previous attacks on Cornisha: assault, property damage, arson. She was facing serious time for all the incidents from 2021. But the courts had let her walk free, and now their leniency had cost a young mother her life. The most damning evidence? Detectives found that Shakia's cell phone had pinged towers right near the crime scene at the exact time of the shooting. Then, minutes later, those same signals showed her phone moving across town to an apartment complex where her sister lived. By 10:30 that same night, South Fulton tactical units had surrounded that apartment building. This was a high-risk arrest. They were dealing with someone who had just proven she was willing to kill, someone who was armed and dangerous. But when officers moved in, prepared for anything, they found a completely different scene than expected. Shakia didn't fight. She didn't run. She didn't try to shoot it out with police. Instead, she surrendered with her hands up, switching between crying hysteria and this eerie, cold calm. Body camera footage later showed her muttering to herself, saying fragments like she had no choice, like Cornisha made her do it. She was already trying to justify murder, already crafting her victim narrative before she even got to the police station. But the evidence spoke louder than her excuses. In her car, parked right outside that apartment building, investigators found everything they needed. The 9mm handgun, same caliber used in the killing, a notebook with details about Cornisha's daily routine, her work schedule, where she went and when, proof that this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment crime, and on her phone, a draft message that she never sent but that told the whole story. It's done now. You can't leave me again. That message right there shows you everything about Shakia's mindset. This wasn't about love. This was about control. This was about a woman who would rather commit murder than accept rejection. The arrest brought some relief to Cornisha's family and the community, but it also brought anger. How many warnings had been ignored? How many times had the system let them down? Police Chief Keith Meadows later admitted that his officers had arrested Shakia 4 different times in domestic violence cases, but the courts kept granting bond. Every single time she was released, she came back more dangerous than before. Every single time Cornisha called for help, the response was too little, too late, and now 4 children were left without their mother because the system failed to protect her when she needed it most. But y'all, this story ain't over yet. The arrest was just the beginning. Next came the fight for justice, and let me tell you something. That courtroom was about to see some things. When Shakia Perkins' trial began, that courtroom was packed tighter than Sunday service. Journalists, community activists, domestic violence advocates, and regular folks who had been following this case, everybody wanted to see if the system would finally get it right. The prosecution came ready, y'all. They laid out a timeline of violence that painted the clearest picture you ever seen. They walked that jury through every incident, the car ramming, the forced entry, the arson, those chilling text messages where Shakia literally promised to commit first-degree murder. Piece by piece, they built their case. The forensic experts testified that the shell casings found at Cornisha's house matched the gun found in Shakia's car. Cell tower records put her right at the scene when those shots were fired. And those text messages, they read them out loud in that courtroom, and you could hear people gasp when they heard Shakia's own words promising death. But what really got to people wasn't just the technical evidence. It was hearing from the people who lived through Cornisha's nightmare with her. Neighbors testified about hearing the arguments, witnessing the destruction, and watching Cornisha's fear grow over time. Friends took the stand and talked about those late-night phone calls where Cornisha would whisper that she didn't feel safe, that she believed one day Shakia would actually follow through on her threats. These weren't strangers talking. These were people who loved Cornisha and had tried to help her escape. Then came the most heartbreaking testimony of all, victim impact statements from Cornisha's family. Her children's voices were heard through advocates who read their words aloud. They talked about birthdays without mama, holidays that felt empty, and the silence where her laughter used to be. The jury was visibly shaken, y'all. You could see grown folks wiping tears as they heard about 4 babies who would never get another hug from their mother, never get another bedtime story, never get to show her their report cards or tell her about their day. Now Shakia's defense team tried their best to paint a different picture. They talked about mental health struggles, emotional instability, and tried to argue that this was a crime of passion rather than premeditated murder. They wanted the jury to see Shakia as a victim of her own emotions. But here's the thing, the evidence was just too strong. That notebook with Cornisha's daily routine, that showed planning. Those text messages promising first-degree murder, that showed intent. Walking out to get the gun and walking back in, that showed premeditation. After days of testimony and just hours of deliberation, that jury came back with their verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder, guilty of firearm possession during a felony, guilty of cruelty to children for forcing that baby to witness their mama's death. When the judge delivered the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, the courtroom went completely silent. Shakia Perkins would never walk free again, never hurt another woman, never terrorize another family. But for Cornisha's people, that verdict was bittersweet. Justice in the legal sense? Yeah, they got that. But the real justice, bringing Cornisha back to raise her babies, that was something no court could ever deliver. Outside that courthouse, Cornisha's sister Tyrika spoke with the kind of quiet strength that runs in families. She said while they were grateful for the conviction, the real tragedy was that it took Cornisha's death to get the system's attention. How many warnings had been ignored? How many chances did they have to prevent this? The community wasn't quiet about their anger either. Vigils were held throughout South Fulton and Atlanta, with people lighting candles and releasing balloons in Cornisha's memory. Social media was flooded with pictures and videos celebrating her life, her smile, her hustle, her dedication to those 4 babies. But mixed in with all that love was a whole lot of rage. Domestic violence advocates use Cornisha's story to spotlight how the system fails women every single day. They pointed out that she had done everything right, filed reports, got restraining orders, documented every incident, and still she ended up dead. Period. That's the harsh reality, y'all. Women can follow every rule, check every box, and still lose their lives because the system moves too slow and takes threats too lightly. When Cornisha's funeral came, the grief was overwhelming. That sanctuary was packed beyond capacity, with people standing outside because they couldn't fit everyone who came to pay respects. Her casket, covered in flowers, sat at the front while her 4 children, dressed in white, sat in the front row, surrounded by family who promised to love them through this trauma. The service celebrated her life, her resilience, her dreams, her devotion to her babies. But it also served as a wake-up call. Pastor after pastor talked about how domestic violence doesn't discriminate, how it happens in every community, every relationship type, every economic class. Even after the funeral, questions remained. Police Chief Keith Meadows himself admitted that his officers had done everything within their power, arresting Shakia 4 separate times for domestic violence. But the courts, they kept letting her out on bond, ignoring prosecutors who warned she was dangerous. Make it make sense. How do you arrest someone for ramming cars, setting fires, and sending death threats, but then let them walk free? How do you ignore a clear pattern of escalation and treat each incident like it's separate? The district attorney's office had opposed bond every single time, warning judges that Shakia was a flight risk and a danger to Cornisha. But those warnings fell on deaf ears, and now 4 children are growing up without their mother. This case became a symbol of how the system fails domestic violence victims over and over again. It showed that restraining orders are just pieces of paper if they're not enforced, that arrests don't mean anything if bond is automatically granted, and that women's fears are often dismissed until it's too late. For those of us watching from the outside, Cornisha's story is a call to action. When someone in your life says they're scared of their partner, believe them. When they show you threatening messages, take them seriously. When they ask for help, don't just tell them to leave, help them make a safety plan and connect them with resources. Because leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time for victims. That's when abusers realize they're losing control, and that's when they escalate to the ultimate form of control, murder. And if you're in a situation like Cornisha was in, please hear me. Those threats are not empty. When someone tells you they're willing to go to prison to hurt you, they mean every word. Don't take chances with your life because you think they're just talking. Girl, your life is worth more than any relationship, any shared history, any fear of starting over. Your children need you alive more than they need you to try to make a toxic situation work. Cornisha Butler was just 29 years old when her life was cut short. She was a mother, a business owner, a daughter, a sister, a friend. She had dreams for her future and hopes for her children's lives. All of that was stolen by someone who couldn't accept the word no. Her story reminds us that domestic violence doesn't have a look, doesn't have a gender, doesn't have a sexual orientation. It's about power and control. And when someone is determined to maintain that control, they will escalate to violence. But maybe, just maybe, if we tell Cornisha's story enough times, if we demand better from our systems, if we support survivors in our communities, we can prevent the next tragedy. Because every woman deserves to live without fear, and every child deserves to grow up with their mother. Rest in power, Cornisha Butler. Your voice may have been silenced, but your story lives on, and we won't let your death be in vain. That's the real tea, y'all. That's the lesson we need to learn. And that's why stories like this need to be told, need to be heard, and need to inspire change. Anyways, if this story touched you, if it made you think, if it reminded you to check on someone you love, then Cornisha's legacy continues. Because that's what she would want, for her pain to protect other women, for her death to save other lives. Let me tell you something, we can't bring Cornisha back, but we can honor her by demanding better, by speaking up, and by never forgetting that behind every statistic is a real person with real dreams who deserve to live. Until next time, this has been Unheard Cries TV, making sure their voices are never forgotten.